The day I caught them together wasn't even the worst part. No, the worst came 3 months later, when Rosalind had the audacity to throw a party at my family's vineyard. The same vineyard where I'd grown up, where Oscar and I had gotten married, where I'd planned to spend the rest of my life. My name is Zoe, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. A loving husband, a thriving family business, and what I believed was a supportive stepmother. Funny how life has a way of shattering everything you think you know. I stood at the edge of the property that evening, watching cars pull up the winding gravel driveway. The fairy lights Rosalind had strung through the grape arbors, my grape arbors, twinkled mockingly in the twilight. Music drifted across the rows of vines, along with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. "You shouldn't be here," Mackenzie said, appearing beside me. "Let's go get a drink somewhere else." I shook my head. I need to see this. Through the windows of the main house, I could see Rosalind holding court in her designer dress, her perfectly manicured hand resting on Oscar's arm. My husband. Ex-husband now, I supposed, though the divorce papers weren't even finalized yet. "Did you know," I said to Mackenzie, my voice surprisingly steady, "that Oscar and I planted those Cabernet vines together 3 years ago? He complained the whole time about the heat, but we did it together. And now he's in there, acting like he owns the place." "Zoe! And my father's letting them do this." I watched Stanley raise his glass in a toast, beaming at his wife, my stepmother, while she basked in the attention. "He has no idea what they did." Eugene, our vineyard manager, approached from the direction of the storage buildings. He'd worked these fields since before I was born, and his weathered face showed nothing but concern. "Miss Zoe, you shouldn't torture yourself like this." "They're destroying everything my mother built," I said. "Everything we've worked for." Through the window, I watched Oscar lean down to whisper something in Rosalind's ear. She threw her head back and laughed, a sound I could imagine even from this distance. I'd heard that laugh so many times over family dinners, never suspecting what was happening behind my back. "Let's go." Mackenzie tugged at my arm. "This isn't helping anything." But I couldn't move. Because right then, Rosalind spotted me through the window. Our eyes met across the distance, and instead of having the decency to look ashamed, she smiled. Actually smiled, raised her wineglass in my direction, and took a deliberate sip. "That's it." I straightened my spine. "Eugene, who's manning the irrigation system tonight?" "Nobody, Miss Zoe. Party night." "Good." I started walking toward the control shed, my heels sinking slightly into the soft earth between the vines. Mackenzie hurried after me. "What are you planning?" I punched in the code and threw open the shed door. "Remember when we were kids and the sprinklers would come on unexpectedly?" "Zoe, no." But I was already hitting switches. Within seconds, the party erupted into chaos as the sprinkler system activated full force, sending guests scrambling and screaming. Through the windows, I watched Rosalind's perfect hair collapse, her expensive dress soaked through. Oscar, ever the coward, knocked over 2 people in his rush to get inside. "That's just the beginning," I said, watching the pandemonium with a satisfaction that should have scared me, but didn't. "They want to play games with my vineyard? Fine, but they have no idea who they're dealing with." Eugene cleared his throat. "Your mother would be proud, you know, not of the sprinklers," he added quickly, "but of how you're standing up for what's yours." I turned to Mackenzie, who was trying and failing to hide her grin. "Help me take it back? All of it?" She linked her arm through mine. "Oh, honey, I thought you'd never ask. But we're going to do this right. Strategic. Make them regret ever crossing you." As we walked away, leaving the sounds of the ruined party behind us, I felt something I hadn't experienced since finding Oscar and Rosalind together in my own bed. Hope. They thought they could take everything from me, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail. This vineyard wasn't just my inheritance or my business. It was my home, my heritage, and my future. And I was done playing nice. The morning after the sprinkler incident, I was already at work among the vines when the sun rose. There's something therapeutic about pruning, removing the dead weight so the healthy parts can thrive. If only fixing my life were as straightforward. You're here early, Eugene called out, making his way down the row. Thought you might sleep in after last night's excitement. I snipped another damaged tendril. Can't afford to. The Syrah needs attention before the heat sets in. That's not all that needs attention. He handed me a local newspaper. There, on the front page, was a photo of last night's chaos. The headline read, "Local vineyard party ends in mysterious sprinkler malfunction." Mysterious, huh? I couldn't help but smile. Rosalind's furious. She's been calling all morning, demanding we fire whoever was responsible for the system. Good luck with that. You going to fire me, Eugene? He chuckled, then grew serious. Your father called too. Says he wants to talk about proper business conduct. Before I could respond, Mackenzie's SUV came roaring up the dirt road, kicking up dust. She jumped out, waving a stack of papers. You're not going to believe what I found, she announced, practically running between the vines. Remember that accounting firm where Oscar used to work? The one he got fired from last year? What about it? Well, I have a friend there who owes me a favor. Look at this. She thrust the papers at me. Oscar wasn't fired. He was caught cooking the books for several clients. They gave him the option to resign quietly. Eugene whistled low. That explains why he's been so desperate for money lately. There's more, Mackenzie continued. He's been trying to secure loans using this vineyard as collateral. Your vineyard, Zoe. My pruning shears hit the ground. He can't do that. He has no legal right. Through Rosalind, Mackenzie cut in. She's convinced your father to put up the vineyard as collateral for their new business venture. What business venture? Some luxury resort they want to build on the upper field. They're planning to tear out the old vines. The world tilted sideways. Those vines were over 50 years old, planted by my grandfather. My mother had protected them her whole life. Over my dead body, I growled. That's the spirit, Mackenzie grinned. And I have an idea. You know the Wine Country Festival next month? The one Rosalind's been bragging about hosting? What about it? What if we hosted our own event? Something exclusive, something that would show everyone who really knows this business. We could invite all the right people, critics, distributors, the works. Eugene nodded slowly. The 82 Cabernet is almost ready. Been saving it for something special. Perfect timing, Mackenzie said. We'll show them what real wine culture looks like, not that pretentious circus Rosalind's planning. A commotion at the main house caught our attention. Oscar's expensive sports car was pulling up, Rosalind in the passenger seat. They both looked hungover and angry. Incoming, Eugene muttered. Let them come, I said, picking up my pruning shears. I've got work to do. Oscar approached first, his designer shoes completely wrong for the vineyard terrain. Real mature, Zoe. You could have ruined thousands in equipment last night. Funny, I don't remember giving you permission to host events here at all. Rosalind tottered up in her heels. Your father gave us permission. Remember him? The actual owner? Co-owner, I corrected. Or did you forget to mention that part to the banks you've been talking to? That made them both freeze. Rosalind recovered first, her practiced smile sliding into place. I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, I cut her off. About Oscar's creative accounting, about your plans for the upper field. Did you really think nobody would notice? You're just bitter, Oscar sneered. Can't stand to see us happy? Happy? I laughed. Is that what you call drowning in debt and destroying a century-old vineyard? Get off my property, both of you. You can't, Rosalind started. Actually, she can, Eugene interrupted, holding up a document. According to the operational agreement, Zoe has full authority over day-to-day operations, including who's allowed on the premises. They left, but not before Rosalind turned back with a venomous smile. This isn't over, sweetheart. Not by a long shot. No, I agreed, watching them go. It's just beginning. I turned to Mackenzie. That event you mentioned? Let's do it, but let's make it bigger than they could ever imagine. Now you're talking, she grinned. Time to show them what you're really made of. Looking out over the vineyard, my vineyard, I felt a surge of determination. They thought they could take this from me, but they had no idea what I was capable of. The vines weren't the only things about to experience a serious pruning. "No, tell me about when it started going wrong," Tessa said, her recorder placed between us on the tasting room table. The young journalist had been persistent in pursuing this story, and after a week of calls, I'd finally agreed to meet. "Which part?" I swirled the wine in my glass. "The affair, or the moment I realized my husband was a fraud?" "Both." She leaned forward. "The community wants to understand what really happened." I closed my eyes, remembering that first warning sign 6 months ago. It was during the Harvest Festival. Oscar was supposed to help with the event, but he called last minute to cancel, said he had to work late. But he wasn't at work? No. A friend saw him and Rosalind at a restaurant 2 towns over. When I confronted him, he said they were discussing family business. I laughed bitterly. I believed him. God, I was so stupid. Eugene appeared in the doorway. "Miss Zoe, the shipment from the Coopers just arrived. Need your signature." "Excuse me," I told Tessa, grateful for the interruption. Outside, Eugene handed me the clipboard. "You sure about talking to that reporter?" "They're going to tell their version anyway. Might as well get ahead of it." I signed the delivery form. Besides, Oscar and Rosalind aren't the only ones who can shape a narrative. Speaking of narratives, Eugene pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Found this while cleaning out the old storage room. Thought you might want to see it." Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. My mother, young and beautiful, standing among the vines with my father. They looked happy, in love. Before Rosalind, before everything fell apart. "Your mother knew, you know," Eugene said quietly, "about your father and Rosalind. She confronted them right here in this vineyard, a month before her accident." The photograph trembled in my hands. "What?" "Found some old letters, too. Your mother was planning to divorce him, take full control of the vineyard. Then the car accident happened, and well," he trailed off. "Are you saying—" "I'm not saying anything, Miss Zoe. Just thought you should have all the pieces." Back in the tasting room, Tessa was making notes. She looked up as I entered. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just memories." I sat down heavily. "Where were we?" "You were telling me about Oscar's lies." "Right." I took a steadying breath. The funny thing about lies is how they pile up. One day I came home early and found bank statements Oscar had tried to hide. Massive debts, failed investments, money moved between accounts that didn't make sense. And Rosalind was involved? Up to her neck. They'd been planning it for months, maybe years, using the vineyard's reputation to secure loans, promising investors returns they could never deliver. A commotion outside drew our attention. Through the window, I saw Rosalind's red convertible pull up. She stepped out, looking every bit the wealthy vineyard owner's wife, despite the mounting evidence of their financial troubles. "Excuse me again," I told Tessa. "This should be interesting." Rosalind burst through the door before I could reach it. "You need to call off your attack dog," she hissed, waving her phone. "This reporter friend of yours is asking dangerous questions." "Truth feeling dangerous these days, Rosalind? You have no idea what you're doing. If this gets out..." "If what gets out? The fraud, the affairs, or something worse?" I stepped closer. Like what really happened to my mother. For just a moment, Rosalind's perfect mask slipped. Fear flickered across her face before she recovered. "You're delusional. Grief has clearly affected your judgment." "Have you told my father about the loans yet? About how you and Oscar plan to strip this place bare?" "Everything we did was for the good of this vineyard." "Get out." My voice was ice. "And tell Oscar that if either of you shows up here again, I'm going straight to the SEC with everything I have." After she left, Tessa appeared beside me. "I got all that on record, you know." "Good," I turned to her. "But hold the story. There's more coming, and you're going to want to wait for the finale." "What finale?" I smiled, thinking of the event Mackenzie and I were planning. Let's just say karma's about to serve something stronger than wine. That evening, alone in my office, I spread out the old photographs and letters Eugene had found. My mother's handwriting jumped off the pages, telling a story of betrayal that echoed my own. But unlike her, I had time to fight back. Time to make things right. My phone buzzed. A text from Mackenzie. "You won't believe what I just found in Oscar's old email account." I texted back immediately. "Tell me everything." The pieces were falling into place, and soon everyone would know the truth. All of it. The Fernandez Vineyards tasting room buzzed with the Valley's elite, all gathered for Cadence's annual wine showcase. I hadn't planned to attend, but Mackenzie insisted it was time to show my face in public again. "Well, well," a voice drawled behind me. "Look who finally emerged from exile." I turned to face Cadence herself, elegant in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly profits. "Lovely event as always." "Save it." She sipped her wine. "We both know you're not here to compliment my Merlot. Word is you're planning something big at Newton Vineyard. News travels fast." "Small Valley." Her eyes narrowed. "You're going head-to-head with Rosalind's event? Bold move." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Oscar walked in, alone for once, looking expensive but exhausted. His eyes found mine immediately. "Speak of the devil," Cadence murmured. "This should be entertaining." Oscar wound his way through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and fake smiles. I turned to leave, but Cadence caught my arm. "Stay," she said. "My money's on you." Oscar reached us, his cologne too strong as always. "Zoe, we need to talk." "No, we really don't. It's about the vineyard, about our future." "Our future?" I laughed. "You mean the future you planned with my stepmother while sleeping in my bed?" Several nearby conversations stopped. Oscar's face reddened. "This isn't the place." "Actually," Cadence interrupted, "my tasting room is the perfect place for honesty. The best wines don't hide their flaws. They embrace them." She turned to Oscar. "Speaking of flaws, how's that investment scheme working out?" Oscar's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Cadence smiled sweetly. "That's not what my banker says. Apparently, you've been shopping for loans all over the valley. Desperate times?" I watched Oscar's composure crack slightly. Mackenzie's investigation had revealed just how deep his financial troubles ran, but seeing him squirm made it real. "This is a private matter," he said stiffly. "Nothing's private in wine country," Cadence replied, "especially not when you try to use my family's name as a reference without permission." That was news to me. I looked at Cadence with fresh interest. "You know," she continued, "I never liked you, Oscar, even before you proved me right by betraying Zoe. But trying to drag my family's reputation into your mess? That's a vintage of stupid I can't ignore." Oscar's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face went pale. "I have to go." "Problems?" I called after him as he retreated. "Better hurry back to Rosalind. I hear she gets anxious when her plans start falling apart." After he left, Cadence turned to me. "That was fun. Now tell me about this event you're planning." "Why? Looking for more entertainment?" "Looking to help, actually." She led me to a private corner. "Rosalind tried to poach my head vintner last month, offered him double his salary to help legitimize their new venture." "Did he take it?" "Please." Cadence rolled her eyes. "He's worked for my family for 20 years, but it showed me what they're capable of." "So?" She raised her glass. "How can I help destroy them?" Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a text from Oscar. "We need to meet, tomorrow. It's important." "Interesting timing," Cadence said, reading over my shoulder. "What are you going to do?" Spring the trap." I showed her Mackenzie's latest findings. Emails proving Oscar and Rosalind had been planning this takeover for years, even before my mother's death. "They think they're the ones holding all the cards." "But you have the winning hand," Cadence finished. "Count me in. My distributors would love an invitation to a proper wine event." "You're serious about helping?" "Darling, nothing pairs better with revenge than a good Cabernet." She clinked her glass against mine. "Besides, your mother was a legend in this valley. What they did to her legacy, to you, It's unforgivable. My phone buzzed again. Oscar. Please, one meeting, neutral location. Answer him, Cadence advised. Let him think he's still in control. I typed back. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The cafe in town. Perfect, Cadence said. Now let me show you something. She led me to her private cellar. Your mother helped me when I first took over this place. Taught me everything she knew about winemaking. I've been saving this bottle for the right moment. She pulled out a dusty bottle, a Newton Vineyard label from my mother's last harvest. Bring this to your event, she said. Let them taste what they're trying to destroy. Looking at that bottle, my mother's signature clear on the label, I felt a surge of certainty. Oscar and Rosalind thought they were playing chess, but they'd forgotten the most important rule of wine country. The best vintages take time, patience, and perfect timing. Tomorrow's meeting would be interesting indeed. The cafe's bell chimed as I walked in, exactly 10 minutes late. Oscar was already there, fidgeting with a napkin, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. Good. You came, he said, standing awkwardly as I sat down. You have 15 minutes. I placed my phone on the table, recording app running. Make them count. He leaned forward, voice low. We need your help, Zoe. The vineyard. We? I raised an eyebrow. Where is your partner in crime anyway? Rosalind doesn't know I'm here. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tell I remembered well. Things have gotten complicated. Complicated how? The investors are backing out. The banks are calling in loans. Everything we planned. Everything you stole, you mean? The waitress appeared. I ordered black coffee. Oscar asked for water, his hands shaking slightly. We can fix this, he continued once she left. Your event next month. If you let us be part of it, show a united front. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make nearby diners turn. Let me get this straight. You want me to save you from the mess you created while sleeping with my stepmother? It wasn't like that. No? Then tell me, Oscar, what was it like? Was it like the time you forged my signature on loan documents? Or when you and Rosalind planned to tear out my grandfather's vines for your ridiculous resort? His face paled. How did you know about that? I know everything. I pulled out copies of the emails Mackenzie had found. Every meeting, every plan, every lie. Those are private. Nothing's private when you use company emails, Oscar. Basic mistake. But then, you always did get sloppy when you were desperate. The waitress returned with our drinks. I waited until she left before continuing. Here's what's going to happen. You and Rosalind are going to stay away from my vineyard, my event, and my life. If you don't, these emails go to every bank and investor you've contacted, not to mention the SEC. You wouldn't. Try me. I slid one particular email across the table. This one's interesting. A message to Rosalind from the day before my mother's accident. Want to explain what you meant by taking care of the problem? Oscar's water glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Several patrons jumped. That wasn't what it sounds like, he stammered. No, because it sounds like you and Rosalind had plans long before my mother's convenient accident. Plans that only worked if she was out of the picture. You're twisting things. Am I? Because Tessa from the local paper finds it fascinating. She's running a story next week about my mother's death being reopened for investigation. That was a bluff, but Oscar didn't know that. He looked like he might be sick. What do you want? He whispered. I want you to leave, both of you. Sign over any claim to the vineyard, admit to the fraud, and disappear. We can't. Rosalind would never. Then I guess I'll see you both in court, or prison. I stood up. Oh, and Oscar? The recording of this conversation has been uploading to my cloud drive the whole time. Just in case you get any ideas about denying this conversation. I was almost to the door when he called out. Wait, what about your father? I turned back. What about him? This will destroy him. Finding out about Rosalind, about everything. You should have thought about that before you helped his wife try to steal his daughter's inheritance. Outside, Mackenzie was waiting in her car. How'd it go? Exactly as planned. I buckled my seatbelt. He'll run straight to Roslyn. And she'll panic, Mackenzie grinned. You know she called your father this morning, trying to get him to sign over full control of the vineyard to her before the banks start asking questions. Did he? No. Apparently, Eugene showed him some interesting paperwork about unauthorized loans in his name. My phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. Story's ready. Sure you want to wait? I typed back. Hold until the event. Trust me. Speaking of the event, Mackenzie said, Cadence called. She's invited every major distributor and critic in the region. Even that famous wine blogger from San Francisco is coming. Perfect. I looked out at the valley rolling past, the vines still bare in the winter sun. You know what pairs well with a public takedown? What's that? A really good vintage. I smiled, thinking of my mother's last bottle sitting in Cadence's cellar. And I know just the one. My phone buzzed again. Roslyn this time. We need to talk. Now. I turned off my phone. Let her panic. The real show was just beginning. 3 days before the event, I found Eugene staring at the old vines in the upper field, his face troubled. Something wrong? I asked, joining him. Your father's here, in the main house with Roslyn. He pointed toward the building. They're arguing, loud enough to hear from the storage shed. Through the window, I could see them gesturing wildly. Even from this distance, Roslyn's desperation was visible in her movements. How many RSVPs for tomorrow? Eugene asked. 200 and counting. Cadence's connections came through. Every major player in the valley will be here. And the evidence. Ready? I patted my pocket where I kept the USB drive. Mackenzie's organizing it all into a presentation that'll play on the screens during dinner. Tessa's story is set to go live at exactly 9 p.m. Eugene nodded slowly. Your mother would be proud, but also worried. About what? About what this might cost you. Revenge has a way of... A shout from the house interrupted him. My father stormed out, his face red with anger. Roslyn followed, grabbing his arm. They're coming this way, Eugene warned. Stanley, please, Roslyn was saying. Just sign the papers. It's the only way to protect everything we've built. Built? My father yanked his arm away. You mean destroyed? The banks called me this morning. How could you take out loans without telling me? I was trying to save us. This vineyard is dying, can't you see that? The only thing dying here is your credibility, I called out, making them both turn. Stay out of this, Roslyn snapped. This is between me and my husband. Nothing about this vineyard is between just you two. I stepped forward. Did you tell him about Oscar yet? About your plans for the resort? My father's face went pale. What resort? Don't listen to her, Roslyn pleaded. She's bitter, trying to turn you against me. Like you turned him against Mom? Silence fell across the vineyard. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. What are you talking about? My father asked quietly. Show him, Eugene said softly. Show him the letters. I pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying for days, waiting for this moment. Mom wrote these the week before she died. About you and Roslyn, about what she found out. My father's hands shook as he took the letters. Roslyn's perfect mask cracked. Stanley, don't... But he was already reading, his face growing paler with each line. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. Is this true? He asked Roslyn. Were you and Oscar, even back then? It wasn't like that, she stammered. We were just... planning, I finished. Planning how to take control of the vineyard. Mom found out, didn't she? That's why she was driving to the lawyer's office the day of her accident. You can't prove any of this, Roslyn hissed, but her voice wavered. Actually, Mackenzie's voice rang out as she approached from the main house, tablet in hand. We can prove quite a bit. Your emails from back then were very detailed. I saved everything, Eugene added. Every document, every changed order, every suspicious invoice. Your mother asked me to, Miss Zoe, just in case. My father sank onto a nearby bench. The letters crumpled in his fist. All these years, I thought Catherine's accusations were just jealousy, but she knew. She knew everything. Stanley, Rosalind tried one last time, reaching for him. Don't touch me. He stood up. Don't ever touch me again. The event is in 3 days, I said to Rosalind. You can either leave now, quietly, or stay and watch everything come out publicly. Your choice. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I smiled. By the way, Oscar folded like cheap patio furniture, told me everything. The SEC will be very interested in his statement. Rosalind's face went through a range of emotions before settling on cold fury. This isn't over. Actually, it is. My father's voice was firm. Get out of my vineyard and tell Oscar. Tell him the police will be in touch. We watched her storm off to her car, designer heels sinking into the soft earth between the vines. I'm so sorry, my father whispered once she was gone. Catherine, your mother, I should have seen it. We all should have seen a lot of things. I touched his shoulder. But we can make it right now. The event, Mackenzie said gently. We could use your help, Mr. Newton. Show everyone what this vineyard really stands for. He straightened up, wiping his eyes. What do you need me to do? First, I said, help me protect these vines. Mom loved them more than anything. Except you, Eugene corrected. She loved you more than anything. Looking at the vineyard stretching out before us, I felt her presence more strongly than ever. In 3 days, we'd serve justice alongside her final vintage, and everyone would know the truth. The evening of the event, the vineyard glowed with thousands of twinkling lights. Cadence had outdone herself with the decorations, transforming the space into something magical. 200 of the valley's most influential people mingled among the vines, glasses in hand. They're here, Mackenzie whispered, appearing at my elbow. Oscar and Rosalind just pulled up. Right on schedule. I smoothed down my black dress. Is everything ready? Presentations queued up. Tessa's article is set to go live, and that special bottle from your mother's last harvest is breathing. She squeezed my arm. You sure about this? Before I could answer, Oscar and Rosalind made their entrance. They'd dressed for battle. Him in an expensive suit, her in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. But I could see the strain in their faces, the slight tremor in Rosalind's hand as she grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing server. Showtime, I murmured. I took the stage where a microphone waited, tapping it gently to get everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, turning to face me. Welcome to Newton Vineyard, I began. Some of you have known this land for decades. Others are new friends. But everyone here tonight shares one thing, a love for authentic wine and authentic stories. I caught Rosalind's eye in the crowd. She was gripping Oscar's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. My mother used to say that every bottle tells a story. Tonight, I want to share one with you. I nodded to Mackenzie, who started the presentation. Photos began appearing on the large screens. Old pictures of my mother, the vineyard, documentation of loans and fraudulent papers. This is a story about legacy, I continued, about trust, and about what happens when people try to steal what isn't theirs. Oscar started moving toward the exit, but Cadence's security team was already blocking the doors. Rosalind stood frozen, watching her crimes appear in high definition. Over the past year, certain individuals attempted to take control of this vineyard through fraud, manipulation, and possibly worse. I paused as gasps rippled through the crowd. They thought nobody would notice. They were wrong. You can't prove any of this, Rosalind called out, her voice shrill. Actually, my father's voice boomed as he stepped onto the stage beside me. We can prove all of it, including your involvement in Catherine's death. The crowd erupted in whispers. Tessa, standing near the front, was recording everything on her phone, live streaming to her newspaper's website. You see, I continued, my mother discovered their plan just before her accident. She left evidence, letters, emails, records of meetings that certain people claimed never happened. Oscar broke away from Rosalind, pushing through the crowd toward the stage. Zoe, please. Please what, Oscar? Please don't tell everyone how you and my stepmother plotted to steal my inheritance. Or please don't mention the SEC investigation that's about to begin. Right on cue, two men in suits stepped forward from the crowd, showing their badges. Mr. Kennedy, Mrs. Wagner, we'd like you to come with us. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Rosalind, seeing her world crumbling, grabbed a bottle from a nearby table and hurled it toward the stage. It shattered against the screen, wine spraying like blood. "You ungrateful little bitch!" she screamed. "After everything I did for you." "Everything you did to me," I corrected, my voice steady. "And to my mother. And to this vineyard." Security moved in quickly, restraining both Oscar and Rosalind as the federal agents approached. The crowd watched in stunned silence as handcuffs clicked into place. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the audience again, "I promise the rest of tonight's wine will be served in glasses, not thrown. And speaking of wine," I gestured to Eugene, who wheeled out a cart with a single bottle. "This is from my mother's final harvest. She never got to see it bottled, but she knew it would be special." As Oscar and Rosalind were led away, I began pouring small tastings of my mother's last vintage for the critics and distributors in attendance. The room buzzed with conversation. Phones lit up with notifications as Tessa's story went live. Cadence appeared at my side, accepting a glass. "Well done, though I think you actually undersold the drama." "Evening's not over yet," I smiled, nodding toward where my father stood, talking to the federal agents, providing his official statement. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked out over the vineyard, at the lights twinkling among the vines my mother had loved so much. "Now? Now we make wine. Real wine, with real stories behind it." "To authentic vintages," Cadence raised her glass. "And authentic justice," I added, clinking my glass against hers. The night air carried the sound of sirens fading into the distance, while the vineyard continued its age-old work of turning darkness into something worth celebrating. The morning sun painted the courtroom steps golden as reporters swarmed around us, shouting questions. Mackenzie pushed through them, creating a path, while Eugene and my father flanked me protectively. "Miss Newton, how do you feel about the verdict? Any comment on the 20-year sentence? Will you be pursuing civil charges?" I paused at the top of the steps, turning to face them. Justice was served today, not just for me, but for my mother. Inside the waiting car, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. The trial had been exhausting, but watching Oscar and Rosalind's faces as the guilty verdicts were read made every moment worth it. "You did good in there, kid," Eugene said, his weathered face proud. "Catherine would have loved seeing you stand up there, telling the truth without flinching." My father reached across the seat, squeezing my hand. Our relationship was still healing, but each day brought us closer to understanding. "The vineyard called," Mackenzie said, checking her phone. "The new Cabernet batch needs your approval for bottling." I smiled. "Back to real work, then." At the vineyard, Cadence was waiting by the main house, holding a newspaper. "Have you seen this?" The headline read, "Newton Vineyard Triumph, Justice Served with Notable Vintage." Below was a glowing review of our latest wine, paired with coverage of the trial's conclusion. "Tessa outdid herself," I said, scanning the article. "Speaking of outdoing," Cadence grinned, "wait until you see this." She led us to the tasting room, where a group of international distributors stood examining bottles of our wine. "They flew in this morning," she whispered. "After reading about the trial and tasting our latest vintage, they want exclusive contracts." Eugene appeared with a stack of papers. "Miss Zoe," the bank called. "With the restitution payments from Oscar and Rosalind's seized assets, we can finally restore the upper field. Those old vines your mother loved so much, we can save them all." "There's something else," my father said quietly. "I found this in your mother's old office." He handed me a sealed envelope, the paper yellowed with age. Inside was a letter, dated just days before her death. "My dearest Zoe, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I've documented everything. The fraud, the affairs, the threats. Eugene knows where to find it all. But more importantly, I've documented every lesson I ever learned about making wine, about running this vineyard, about standing up for what's right. The papers are in the old barrel in the cellar, the one marked with your birth date. Remember, the best vintages come from vines that have weathered storms. You are stronger than any storm they can throw at you. All my love, Mom. The barrel, I whispered. Eugene, is it still? Right where she left it. He was already heading toward the cellar. The old barrel contained notebooks filled with my mother's handwriting, detailed instructions for every aspect of winemaking, along with personal notes about her hopes for the vineyard's future. And me. She knew, I said, running my fingers over her words. She knew what they were planning, and she made sure the truth would come out. And now it has, Mackenzie said. So what's next? I looked around at these people who had stood by me, Mackenzie with her unwavering loyalty, Eugene with his quiet strength, Cadence with her unexpected friendship, my father with his determination to make amends, and even Tessa, who had helped share our story with the world. Now, I said, we honor her legacy, not just by making wine, but by making it right. To Catherine, Eugene raised an imaginary glass. To Karma, Cadence added with a smirk. To family, my father said softly. The real kind. To truth, Mackenzie chimed in. I picked up my mother's notebook, her final gift guiding us toward the future she'd always envisioned. To all of it, and to the next vintage. May it be our best yet. Outside, the vines stretched toward the sun, stronger for having survived the storm. Just like me, just like all of us. The distributors were calling for me, eager to discuss contracts. There were wines to be bottled, vines to be tended, stories to be told. But now each bottle would carry not just our family name, but the truth of how we'd fought to preserve it. My phone buzzed. A message from the prison warden. Mrs. Wagner requests a meeting. I deleted it without responding. Some vintages are better left in the past. Ready? Mackenzie asked, gesturing toward the waiting distributors. I tucked my mother's notebook under my arm. Ready. Together, we walked into the tasting room, where new stories waited to be poured, one glass at a time.
My name's Sarah, and if you told me 5 years ago that I'd be in the middle of a tech startup whirlwind with Alex, of all people, I'd have laughed in your face. Alex and I met in college, in one of those highfalutin business courses where everyone thinks they're the next big thing. From the get-go, Alex and I were at each other's throats, competing for grades, internships, you name it. Think you can beat my presentation, Sarah? Alex would tease, leaning against the classroom door with that annoying smirk. Watch me, Alex. I'm not just going to beat it, I'm going to make you wish you never stepped up. I'd fire back, my words a mix of jest and determination. That was our thing, always pushing each other to be better, but never admitting it was actually helpful. It wasn't until a group project forced us to work together that things shifted. We found our rhythm, a balance between his bold ideas and my attention to detail. One night, while cramming for the project, we ended up sharing more than just notes. You know, Sarah, I always thought you were just a pain in my ass. But you're actually kinda brilliant, Alex confessed, his guard down for once, as we sat amidst a sea of papers and empty coffee cups. Kinda brilliant? Please, I'm the best thing that's happened to this project. But yeah, you're not too shabby yourself, Alex, I said, the words feeling foreign but honest. That project was a turning point. Our bickering turned into brainstorming sessions, and before we knew it, we were more than just competitors or even friends. We were in love, talking about futures and dreams in a way neither of us had dared before. One evening, just as the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the campus, Alex turned to me with an idea. What if we don't just dream about making something of ourselves? What if we actually do it? Together? You mean, start a company? You and me? I asked, the idea sounding crazy but thrilling. Yeah, why not? We make a good team, Sarah. We could make this work, Alex said, his eyes alight with the kind of passion I'd come to admire. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing in the emptying quad. Alright, Mr. Big Shot. But if we're doing this, we're doing it my way. No half-assing it. Deal. But I'm the director, Alex quickly added, that familiar smirk returning. Fine, Mr. Director. But remember, behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes, I quipped, our laughter mingling with the promises of the future. Fast forward to graduation, and we were married. Not just to each other, but to our dream. We poured everything we had into our startup. Alex took the title of director, wearing it like a crown. Part of me found it endearing, his childlike excitement at being able to call himself a director. I knew the title meant the world to him, not for the power it held, but for the status he thought it brought. Our little company started to grow, our dreams slowly turning into reality. It was hard work, longer hours than either of us could have imagined, but we were doing it together. Our little startup was like a newborn, demanding all our time and attention. Alex and I were in it elbow deep, trying to juggle a million things at once. It was during this chaotic dance of meetings, coding sessions, and endless coffee runs that Emily walked into our lives. We hired her on the spot. It wasn't just her confidence, it was her energy. She was like a live wire, ready to electrify our startup and push it into the spotlight. And that's exactly what she did. Emily wasn't just good at her job, she was phenomenal. Her campaigns were creative, edgy, and exactly what we needed. But it wasn't just her work that stood out, it was her personality. She was funny, quick-witted, and fit right into the little family we were building at the company. It was easy with Emily. She had this way of making everyone feel at ease, a magnetic personality that drew you in. But there were moments when I caught a glimpse of something else, a sort of loneliness that she masked with her humor. One day, while we were brainstorming in the office, I decided to broach the subject. Emily, how come someone as awesome as you is still single? Not prying, just curious. Emily's smile faltered for a second before she shrugged, her usual brightness dimming. Guess not everyone's as lucky as you, Sarah. Finding a guy like Alex? That's like striking gold. Her words were offhand, but the undercurrent of bitterness was unmistakable. It caught me off guard, stirring an unease I couldn't quite place. Hey, there's plenty of gold out there. Just gotta know where to look. I tried to lighten the mood, but Emily just shook her head, the topic clearly closed for discussion. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, our little company began to take shape. Emily's campaigns were bringing in clients, and our product was gaining traction. But it wasn't just the business that was growing, our relationships were too. Emily had become an integral part of our lives, blurring the lines between work and friendship. It was a golden time, filled with hard work, harder laughs, and the feeling that we were on the brink of something great. Emily, with her talent and fire, had become more than just an employee, she was a friend, a confidant, and a crucial part of our dream. As our startup began gaining momentum, I noticed a shift in Alex's focus. It wasn't the company that kept him busy, but rather, the pursuit of the perfect business suit or the latest model car. His obsession with appearances had always been a quirk I tolerated, but now it seemed to take precedence over the hard graft our company required. Alex, don't you think there's more to focus on right now than another suit? I asked him one morning, finding him browsing through an online luxury store during work hours. Come on, Sarah. You know how it is. Looking the part is half the battle in business. Life's too short to deny myself the finer things, he retorted without looking up, his attention fixed on the screen. I shook my head, exasperated. Sure, but maybe the other half of the battle is actually running the business? You know, the one we're trying to build here? He finally glanced up, offering a half-smile that was meant to disarm. Relax, Sarah. Everything's under control. A director needs to look sharp. It's good for morale. His nonchalance irked me, but I decided to let it go. There were bigger battles to fight, especially with the unsettling rumors that had begun to circulate around the office. One late evening, I was burning the midnight oil in the office when I decided to take a break and grab some coffee. As I neared the break room, I caught snippets of conversation that made me freeze in my tracks. Saw Alex and Emily cozying up in the marketing suite yesterday. Didn't look like any work meeting to me, one of our developers muttered, unaware of my presence. Yeah, there's definitely something going on there. They've been spending a lot of time together after hours. Another chimed in, their tone laced with gossip. I felt a lump form in my throat. My initial instinct was to brush it off as baseless office chatter, but the seed of doubt was planted. With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with questions, I retreated back to my office, the coffee forgotten. The next day, I decided to confront Alex. I needed to hear his side, to clear the air. Finding him in his office, leaning back in his chair with that all-too-familiar smirk, I didn't waste any time. Alex, we need to talk. There's talk going around about you and Emily. What's going on? My tone was more confrontational than I intended, my emotions getting the better of me. Alex's smirk faded, replaced by a look of confusion. Talk? What talk? Sarah, you know me. Why would I do anything to jeopardize what we have here? His words were meant to be reassuring, but there was a stiffness to his laughter that didn't sit right with me. I want to believe you, Alex, but the rumors. They're not just going to go away. People are talking. People always talk, Sarah. It doesn't mean we have to listen. Emily's a crucial part of our team, nothing more. You think I'd risk our dream for a fling? Alex's voice was firm, his eyes meeting mine in a challenge. I wanted to believe him, to brush off the rumors as just that, rumors. But the nagging doubt lingered, casting a shadow over our conversation. All right, Alex. I just needed to hear it from you. Let's just focus on the work, okay? Always, he replied, but the ease that once defined our interaction seemed strained, tainted by suspicion. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work, trying to ignore the whispers and the sideways glances. Emily, for her part, seemed oblivious to the rumors, her focus solely on her campaigns. But the atmosphere in the office had changed. What was once a place of camaraderie and innovation now felt like a minefield. I found myself observing Alex and Emily more closely, searching for any sign that the rumors might be true. Their interactions, once thoughtless and friendly, now seemed fraught with hidden meanings. The weeks leading up to the big contract signing were a blur of negotiations, revisions, and, frankly, a fair bit of groveling. The director on the other end was the type who'd make a saint swear. Every meeting, every call, it felt like wading through mud. But the payoff? It was going to be huge. This deal was our ticket to the big leagues, a chance to level up our startup in ways we'd only dreamed of. So, I buckled down, ignored the growing pile of laundry at home, and let takeout containers become my primary diet. Look, I know he's a pain, but if we land this, it's game changer, I told Alex during one of our late-night strategy sessions. Yeah, if he doesn't drive us insane first, Alex replied, his eyes glued to his laptop. Emily chimed in with her usual optimism. We've got this. Sarah's been crushing it. He's practically eating out of her hand now. I wasn't so sure about the eating out of her hand part, but we were close, damn close. And when the day finally came to ink the deal, the sense of anticipation in the office was electric. The annoying director, somehow less irksome with a pen in hand ready to sign, was there alongside us, a necessary evil in our path to victory. The moment the contract was signed, the atmosphere shifted from tense anticipation to outright celebration. Champagne bottles popped, and glasses clinked, the sound of success ringing loud in the lobby of our little startup that could. Alex, with that director by his side, stepped forward to address the crowd. I want to take a moment to recognize the incredible effort that went into making today possible. Alex started, his voice carrying over the buzz of conversations. Sarah, in particular, has been instrumental in getting us to this point. There was applause, a few cheers, and I allowed myself a small smile. Maybe all the stress was worth it after all. But then Alex's smile turned into something I couldn't read, a mix of smugness and something colder. Which is why it's even harder to announce that as of today, Sarah will no longer be with us. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that sucks the air right out of you. What are you talking about, Alex? I managed, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. As the director of this company, I've made the decision to let Sarah go. We're moving in a new direction, and it's a decision I've not made lightly, Alex continued, his eyes avoiding mine. The confusion was palpable, the shock of his words echoing off the walls. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mix of disbelief and rising fury taking hold. You can't be serious. After everything, you're firing me? From my own company? My voice was rising, the outrage clear. The room spun, faces blending into a mosaic of shock and sympathy. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This deal was meant to be our triumph, not my downfall. Everyone's eyes were on us, shock painted on every face. But Alex wasn't done. With a coldness I'd never seen in him, he added. And, there's more. I'm filing for divorce, Sarah. This has been a long time coming. Before I could even process the words, Emily, the so-called friend and our advertising executive, stood up and wrapped her arms around Alex. Her laughter sliced through the silence, a sound so out of place it felt surreal. I've known Alex way before you did, sweetie. Emily gloated, her eyes locked on mine, filled with a triumph I couldn't comprehend. All this, your little dream company, was just part of our plan. You were just a stepping stone. The room spun. This was a nightmare. You planned this? My voice was barely a whisper, my mind struggling to piece together the betrayal. Alex shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. Business is business, Sarah. We needed you to get the company off the ground, to seal the deal. And now, we're moving on. The betrayal stung, a physical pain in my chest. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The eyes of our employees, once filled with respect and camaraderie, now showed anger and disbelief. I can't believe you, was all I managed to say before turning to leave, my vision blurred by tears. But then, something unexpected happened. One by one, our team stood up. We're with you, Sarah. Mark, one of our developers, said firmly. We don't want any part of this betrayal. Yeah, count us out. Another joined in. We signed up to work with you, not them. Their words, their solidarity, gave me strength. I wasn't alone. As we all walked out together, Alex's voice echoed in the now empty lobby, calling out in a futile attempt to make them stay. In the end, it was just Alex and Emily left standing in the lobby of the company I built. Their victory was hollow, their future uncertain. We gathered in my small living room, a makeshift war room, surrounded by whiteboards and laptops. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and the buzz of ideas bouncing off the walls. Okay, team, we're at square one again, but that's not going to stop us. I started, my voice firm, trying to project confidence I was still mustering up. We've got the talent, the drive, and most importantly, we've got each other. Mark, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak up. Right, we've got heart, but we also need a solid plan. What's our angle? What are we bringing to the table that's different this time? Lisa, who had always been the creative spark, jumped in. We need to innovate. Remember those ideas we thought were too out there? Now's the time to bring them to life. No holding back. The room nodded in agreement, the energy shifting from uncertainty to excitement. It was clear we were all in, ready to take risks we'd previously shied away from. And what about Alex and Emily? They're not going to take this lying down, I said, the thought of facing them again leaving a bitter taste. We focus on us, not them, Mark said firmly. We build something so good they won't be able to touch us. Let them play their games. We're here to win. The room erupted into a chorus of agreement, the resolve in each voice stronger than any doubt or fear. We need a name, Lisa suddenly said, a smile spreading across her face. Something that tells the world we're not just back, but better than ever. The suggestions started flying, some ridiculous, some brilliant, but all of them infused with the hope and camaraderie that had brought us together in my living room. After hours of debate, brainstorming, and more cups of coffee than I could count, we landed on a name that felt right. It was bold, it was fresh, and it perfectly captured the essence of our new beginning. Phoenix. With our mission clear and our spirits high, we ended the meeting with a sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since the betrayal, I felt like we were on the right path. As everyone packed up their things, Mark lingered behind, a thoughtful look on his face. You know, Sarah, what Alex did, it's going to make our victory that much sweeter. We're going to show him what he lost. We're going to show everyone. His words were the reassurance I needed. Yes, we had been knocked down, but we were far from out. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about proving to ourselves that we could rise from the ashes, stronger and more united than ever. After filing for divorce, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, the kind you don't realize you're carrying until it's gone. My newfound freedom was intoxicating, a fresh start I hadn't known I desperately needed. Then, out of the blue, Alex called, his voice dripping with urgency and desperation. He wanted to meet, and despite every instinct telling me it was a bad idea, curiosity won over. We agreed to meet at a rundown diner on the outskirts of town, a place so nondescript it felt like a metaphor for our failed marriage. Alex was already there when I arrived, looking like a shadow of the man I once knew, with Emily, the cause of all this drama, clinging to his arm like a designer handbag. Sarah, thank you for coming, Alex began, trying to muster a semblance of dignity. We're in a bit of a bind. Emily, her eyes swollen from what I assumed were tears, chimed in with a sniffle. The deal, Sarah, the big deal we were all so happy about, it's gone. Cancelled. I couldn't help it, laughter bubbled up from within me, echoing off the dingy diner walls. Oh, let me guess, the contract that anyone could cancel within 14 days? That one? I managed between fits of laughter. Their faces were a mix of shock and embarrassment. How did you? Alex stammered, unable to finish. The director, the one you found so annoying? Turns out he has a thing against working with backstabbers, I said, my grin widening. The look of defeat on their faces was almost enough to make me feel sorry for them. Almost. Then, Alex, ever the opportunist, tried to salvage what little he could from the wreckage. Sarah, where did you get the funds for your new venture? Legally, I'm entitled to half, he said, desperation seeping through his feigned confidence. The audacity of the man was almost impressive. I laughed, harder this time, the sound bitter. Alex, dear, I've been making money long before you decided playing director suited you. I was a genius when you met me, and I'll be a genius long after you're just a footnote in my success story. Their faces were a picture of realization, the truth finally dawning on them that they had underestimated me at every turn. Standing up, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind, I looked them both in the eye. Good luck, you too. Something tells me you're going to need it far more than I ever will. As I walked out of the diner, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the world in a warm, golden light. It felt symbolic, a sign that despite everything, I was on the right path. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work, my new company, becoming a beacon of hope and ambition. The team and I worked day and night, our shared vision fueling us forward. Meetings with investors, late-night brainstorming sessions, and the relentless pursuit of innovation became my new normal. Each small victory was a testament to our resilience, a middle finger to those who had tried to bring us down. One evening, as we celebrated landing a major client, the team gathered around, beers in hand, the mood light and triumphant. Mark, ever the voice of reason, raised his glass. To Sarah, the toughest boss I've ever had the pleasure of working for. You showed us what it means to rise from the ashes. The team cheered, their support and belief in me more valuable than any deal or contract. Yeah, and to think, Alex and Emily thought they could take you down, Lisa added, laughter in her voice. I smiled, my heart full. Let them think what they want. We're here, we're succeeding, and that's the best revenge we could ever have. After everything that went down, I did the only thing I knew how. I built something new from the ground up. My new company wasn't just a rebound, it was a phoenix rising from the ashes, stronger and more vibrant than anything before. And the best part? My loyal crew was right there with me, every step of the way. We even managed to lock down a deal with the same partner company that bailed on Alex and Emily, proving that integrity and hard work do pay off. One day, as we were wrapping up a team meeting in our new, buzzing office space, Mark couldn't help but bring up the latest gossip that had been making rounds. So, have you guys heard? Alex and Emily's venture tanked. They're drowning in debt. Lisa, always the one to find a silver lining, added with a smirk, "Guess they learned the hard way that you can't build something lasting on lies and betrayal." I leaned back in my chair, the corners of my mouth turning up. Well, it's a tough lesson, but it looks like karma doesn't take shortcuts. The room filled with nods and murmurs of agreement. It was true, we'd come out on the other side of adversity, not just surviving, but thriving. Alright, team, let's keep our eyes on the prize. We've got a lot to do, and I'm damn proud of what we've achieved. But this is just the beginning, I said, standing up, feeling the energy of the room lift even higher. As the team dispersed back to their desks, filled with a renewed sense of purpose, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. Starting over wasn't just about proving Alex and Emily wrong, it was about proving to ourselves that we could overcome anything. Later, as I was getting ready to leave for the day, Mark caught up with me by the elevator. "You know, Sarah, seeing Alex and Emily's downfall doesn't give me as much satisfaction as seeing what we've built here. This is real success." I smiled, looking back at the office where our team was hard at work, laughter and light filling the space. "You're right, Mark. This is what success looks like. Not the failure of others, but the triumph of our own spirit." Stepping into the elevator, I hit the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, I felt a sense of accomplishment wash over me. My new company was more than just a business, it was a testament to resilience, to the power of starting over, no matter the odds. And as for Alex and Emily? Well, their fate was a stark reminder that shortcuts and deceit never lead to lasting success. The real victory was here, in the hard work, the late nights, and the unbreakable bond of a team that had weathered the storm together. It was just another ordinary Tuesday evening in our household, the kind where you're winding down from the day's work, thinking about what to cook for dinner, and maybe catch up on some TV shows you've missed. Mike, my husband of 20 years, was lounging on the sofa, flicking through channels, while I was in the kitchen pondering whether spaghetti or chicken salad would be the lesser of two evils for our waistlines. I was thinking about what our 19-year-old son Alex eats in college. That's when the phone rang, cutting through the mundane silence of our home. Mike glanced at the caller ID and sighed, "It's my folks." There was a hint of reluctance in his voice that didn't go unnoticed. "Go on, pick it up. It's been ages since we last heard from them," I called out from the kitchen, trying to sound more enthusiastic than I felt. Mike's parents, Linda and George, weren't exactly the easiest people to get along with. Their rare calls usually meant they wanted something. Mike pressed the speaker button, and we both braced ourselves. "Hey, Mom, Dad, what's up?" The voice that came through was Linda's, choked with tears. "Oh, Mike, it's all gone. Everything's gone." George's gruffer, more panicked tone interjected. "The company, son. It tanked. We've lost the house, the cars, everything." I stopped what I was doing, the gravity of their situation sinking in. Mike and I exchanged worried glances. Despite our strained relationship, hearing them so vulnerable struck a chord. "So, what's the plan now? Where are you guys staying?" Mike asked, his voice tight with concern. "That's just it, son. We have nowhere to go. We were hoping, maybe, we could come stay with you and Karine for a while." Linda's voice was hopeful yet hesitant. Mike ran a hand through his hair, a clear sign he was stressed. Well, you know the house is actually Corinne's, left to her by her grandma. I gotta talk to her about it. I knew what was coming next. As much as Linda and George could be a handful, they were still his parents. Turning them away wasn't an option, not really. I walked into the living room, taking the phone from Mike. Linda, George, listen, we can figure something out. But it's only temporary, okay? Just until you get back on your feet. Oh, thank you, dear. You're a lifesaver. We won't be any trouble, promise, Linda gushed, relief evident in her voice. After we hung up, Mike slumped back on the couch, a mix of emotions playing across his face. Babe, you sure about this? You know how they are. Always looking down on our lifestyle, expecting the moon. I sighed, sitting next to him, taking his hand. I know. But they're your folks. What else can we do? We'll set some ground rules. Make it clear it's just for a few months. Mike nodded, looking somewhat relieved but still anxious. They mentioned bringing some things. I hope it's not their entire house. The morning Linda and George were due to arrive felt like the calm before the storm. Mike and I had been up since dawn, double-checking every room to ensure everything was as comfortable as possible. Our attempt to bring some order before the inevitable chaos. Corinne, do you think they'll like the setup in their room? Mike asked for what felt like the 10th time, his forehead creased with worry. I shrugged, adjusting a pillow for the umpteenth time. They'll have to. It's not the Ritz, but it's the best we can do. The sound of engines rumbling down our street cut our conversation short. We exchanged a look that said, "Here we go," and made our way to the front door. As we stepped outside, 2 massive moving trucks pulled up, blocking our driveway. Jesus, did they bring the whole house? I muttered under my breath as Mike squeezed my hand, a silent plea for patience. Linda and George emerged from a sleek rental car, looking every bit the displaced royalty. Linda, with her fur coat draped over her shoulders, despite the mild weather, and George, in a suit that looked too formal for our quiet, suburban street. Corinne, Mike. Oh, how we've missed you. Linda exclaimed, embracing me with a force that nearly knocked the wind out of me. Good to see you, Mom, Dad. Mike managed, his voice tight as he accepted their hugs. As the movers began unloading, the sheer volume of some things they'd mentioned became horrifyingly clear. Furniture, boxes, more boxes, and endless bags started piling up in our driveway. Mike and I helped direct the movers, but it quickly became apparent that our house was not prepared for the influx. Every room on the ground floor was soon crowded with their belongings, leaving just narrow paths to navigate through. As the movers left, George clapped his hands together, looking pleased. Well, this feels homier already, doesn't it? That evening, after a day of moving and rearranging, we sat down for dinner. The air was thick with tension, an uncomfortable blend of gratitude and resentment simmering just below the surface. So, Corinne, this spaghetti is interesting, Linda remarked, poking at her plate with a fork as if she expected it to bite back. It's a family recipe, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. Simple but good. Was all she said, but her expression spoke volumes. Mike, sensing my growing frustration, jumped in. Mom, Dad, we're really glad we could help out in your time of need. But we need to remember we're all in this together. It's going to be a bit of an adjustment for everyone. The conversation stumbled along, a clumsy dance around the obvious elephants in the room. After dinner, as we were clearing the table, Mike pulled me aside. Corinne, this is going to be harder than we thought, he whispered, his eyes filled with concern. I sighed, leaning into him. We knew it wouldn't be easy. But we'll make it work. Somehow. The initial excitement of Linda and George's arrival quickly faded, replaced by the daily grind and growing tensions. It wasn't long before their true colors started to show, and with it, the first of many demands. One morning, barely a week into their stay, I was in the kitchen whipping up what I considered a decent breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, and some fresh fruit on the side. Simple, yet filling. That's when Linda strolled in, a look of disdain plastered across her face as she eyed the plates on the counter. "Karine, darling, is this what you call breakfast?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. I turned, forcing a smile. "It's what we usually have. Keeps us going until lunch." Linda scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. No, this won't do at all. Back in our house, we had freshly squeezed orange juice, croissants, and sometimes even smoked salmon for breakfast. You must try a bit harder, dear. I felt a knot form in my stomach, frustration bubbling up. Linda, you know we're not living in luxury here. This is what we eat. If you'd like something else, you're welcome to make it. The rest of the meal passed in awkward silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Mike caught my eye, giving me a sympathetic look that said he'd handle it later. But breakfast was just the beginning. Later that week, George approached me as I was sorting the laundry, a list in hand. "Karine, we need to talk about the groceries. This list here," he said, waving the paper in front of me, "is what Linda and I usually enjoy. We've been very accommodating, but it's time we returned to some semblance of our normal lifestyle." I took the list, my eyes widening as I scanned the items. Marbled steaks, exotic fruits, imported cheeses. The price of these items would blow our grocery budget out of the water. "George, you do realize we're on a budget, right? We can't afford these things on a regular basis." He frowned, crossing his arms. "Well, you'll just have to make do, won't you? We can't be expected to live like this. It's beneath us." I was at a loss for words. The audacity of their demands, their complete disregard for our situation, it was all too much. That night, I vented to Mike, my patience wearing thin. He promised he would talk to them. But talking seemed to do little good. Linda and George remained firmly planted in their bubble of entitlement, making life increasingly difficult for us. The breaking point came when Linda refused to eat the chicken casserole I had prepared for dinner, calling it peasant food. She demanded we order takeout from a pricey restaurant instead. "Listen, Linda, we're doing our best here," I snapped, my patience finally gone. "This is what we're having. If you don't like it, then I'm sorry, but that's just too bad." Her face went red, and for a moment, I thought she might actually explode. "This is no way to treat your guests, Karine. We are your elders, and you should be showing us more respect." Mike stepped in, his tone firm. "Mom, Dad, you're not guests. You're living here because you have nowhere else to go. Karine's right. We can't afford to eat out or buy expensive groceries. You need to respect that this is our home and our rules." The conversation ended with Linda storming off to her room, George following closely behind, muttering about ungrateful children. A whole month had gone by since Linda and George turned our lives upside down. It started with them making a scene at breakfast one morning, both of them clutching their stomachs and making a big show of how our average food was wreaking havoc on their digestion. "This bread, it's like eating cardboard. And don't get me started on the eggs. My stomach's been in knots," Linda complained, her voice teetering between a whine and a demand. George chimed in with a groan, "I haven't felt right since we got here. We need proper food, not this peasant fare." Feeling cornered and wanting to keep the peace, I caved. I started buying the fanciest groceries I could find for them, while Mike and I resorted to fast food just to save on costs. Fast forward a month, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, receipts scattered in front of me. My heart sank as I tallied up the numbers. We were spending double on groceries compared to before Linda and George's arrival. And that wasn't even touching on the water bill, which had skyrocketed thanks to Linda's newfound love for long, luxurious baths. Enough was enough. That evening, as I served dinner, the contrast couldn't have been starker. Linda and George were tucking into their gourmet dishes, while Mike and I nibbled on cheap takeout. My frustration boiled over. Listen up. I started, my voice steady but firm. This can't go on. We're blowing through our budget trying to cater to your tastes. From now on, we're all eating the same food. No more special treatment. Linda looked up, her fork paused midair. You can't be serious. This food is the only thing keeping our health from plummeting in this hovel. George nodded in agreement. Exactly. You expect us to eat fast food? That's absurd. You're being incredibly selfish and lazy, Karine. Their words stung, but I was past caring about their opinions. Before I could retort, Mike slammed his fist down on the table, a rare show of anger from him. That's enough, he barked. You're living under our roof, in Karine's house. You will show her respect. She's been bending over backward to accommodate you, and this is how you repay her? No more. Either you start eating what we provide, or you can find somewhere else to live. The room went silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Linda and George exchanged a look, then silently returned to their meal. The day after the big blow-up, things escalated in a way I couldn't have imagined. It started with a knock at the door, mid-morning. I was in the middle of tidying up the living room, Mike having gone out to run some errands. The delivery guy, a young lad probably in his early 20s, stood there with a smirk, holding a stack of fancy-looking food boxes. Delivery for Karine, he announced, thrusting the boxes into my arms before I could even open my mouth. Confused, I stared down at the assortment of gourmet meals, the kind that cost an arm and a leg from the high-end place downtown. There's been some mistake. I didn't order this. Just then, Linda breezed in, a smug smile on her face. Oh, those are for us. I couldn't stomach another day of that dreadful food you've been serving. I was flabbergasted. And how do you plan on paying for this? I asked, trying to keep my cool. Linda waved a dismissive hand. Oh, don't worry, dear. It's on you. Consider it a thank you for our stay. Fury bubbled up inside me, but before I could confront her further, the phone rang. It was Mike, checking in. I quickly explained the situation, my voice shaking with anger. Stay calm. I'll handle it when I get back, he said, his tone tight with frustration. But staying calm was easier said than done. By the time Mike got back, Linda and George had made themselves comfortable, devouring their expensive meals with relish while I fumed silently. That evening, Mike and I sat them down for another talk. This time, the gloves were off. Mom, Dad, this has got to stop, Mike began, his voice low but firm. You can't just order expensive meals on our dime. It's not right. George scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Oh, please. It's the least you can do after forcing us to eat like paupers. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Forcing you? We're going broke trying to keep you happy. Linda's eyes narrowed. Well, maybe if you managed your money better, you wouldn't be in this situation. That did it. I lost my cool. Managed our money better? We were fine before you showed up, turning our lives upside down. Mike stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. That's it. We've been more than accommodating, but it's clear you have no respect for us or our home. You need to leave. Their reaction was immediate and explosive. Linda started crying, wailing about how ungrateful we were, while George shouted threats about telling everyone how horribly we'd treated them. The argument raged on, voices raised, accusations flying. It was a mess. In the end, Linda and George stormed off to their room, slamming the door behind them. After the debacle with the gourmet food delivery, things went from bad to unbearable. Linda and George's entitlement had reached new heights, and Mike and I were at our wits' end. The final straw came on a chilly Thursday evening. I was in the kitchen, trying to make do with what was left in the pantry for dinner, when Linda sauntered in, her nose wrinkled in disgust at the aroma of the stew I was cooking. That smells, what is that? She asked, her tone dripping with disdain. It's beef stew. It's what's for dinner, I replied, keeping my focus on the pot to avoid snapping at her. Linda made a show of gagging. I can't possibly eat that. You know, it wouldn't kill you to try a little harder, Corinne. This is no way to treat guests. Dinner was a tense affair, with Linda and George barely touching their food while making passive-aggressive comments about the lack of variety. I was seething, but I bit my tongue, determined not to let them get the best of me. After dinner, Mike and I were cleaning up when Linda approached us, a smug look on her face. I've been thinking, she began, with the holidays coming up, it would be nice to have a new coat. Something warm and stylish. I stopped in my tracks, staring at her in disbelief. A new coat? With what money, Linda? Oh, I thought you could use the money you've set aside for, what was it? Oh, yes, your son's college fund. That was it. The last straw. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew could turn the tide, my grandmother. Gran, despite her age and residing in a nursing home, had always been the matriarch of our family, her word law. After I spilled out the whole sorry saga, she huffed in disbelief. This nonsense has gone on long enough, Gran declared, her voice crackling with resolve over the phone. I'm coming to stay for a bit. We'll sort this mess out together. True to her word, a couple of days later, Gran arrived, wheelchair and all, ready to reclaim her territory. As she rolled into the living room, commandeering the space with her presence, Linda and George looked on in shock. I'll be staying on the ground floor, Gran announced, scanning the room filled with Linda and George's belongings. So, all this, she waved a dismissive hand around, needs to go upstairs. Linda's face turned a shade of red I didn't know was possible. You can't just come in and demand. Gran cut her off with a look that could freeze lava. This house? It's still mine. Corinne and Mike are here because I allow it. And that means I can kick you out whenever I please. The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Within hours, Linda and George were scrambling to call movers, their complaints and protests drowned out by Gran's unwavering stance. As their furniture and countless boxes were hauled up the stairs, Gran turned to me, a twinkle in her eye. Now, let's see if they still feel entitled to steak dinners and new coats. Gran's strategic maneuvering had just begun to unfold in our household. The air was charged with anticipation as we gathered in the living room, the scent of freshly brewed tea mingling with the tension. Now, Gran began, her voice steady, we need to address the matter of rent. Linda scoffed, crossing her arms. Rent? Why should we pay rent when Corinne and Mike don't? Gran smiled, a glint in her eye. Corinne and Mike live here under my grace. They contribute to the household in many ways. But you too, she paused, her gaze sharpening, have been living off their generosity without giving much in return. I think a rent of $4,000 a month would be appropriate. George's face went ashen. $4,000? That's outrageous. We're retired, we don't have that kind of money. Gran leaned forward, her expression unyielding. Considering the lavish meals and the luxurious lifestyle you seem accustomed to, I'd say you can afford it. Linda, her voice trembling with indignation, turned to me. Corinne, surely you don't agree with this extortion? Before I could reply, Gran interjected. It's not extortion, Linda. It's about fairness. But I'm willing to negotiate. She paused, a sly smile playing on her lips. If you're willing to help take care of me during your stay, push my wheelchair around, make breakfast, help with my bath, I might consider reducing the rent. The suggestion hung in the air, heavy and unappealing to Linda and George, who exchanged a look of utter disbelief. George, ever the pragmatist, asked, and how much would this assistance reduce the rent? Gran tapped her chin, pretending to ponder. Let's say, down to $2,000, provided the help is substantial and consistent. Linda's mouth dropped open, but before she could protest, George cut in. And if we refuse? Gran's response was swift and final. Then you're welcome to find somewhere else to live. This house," she gestured around, "will no longer be your refuge." The ultimatum was clear. Linda and George, faced with the prospect of actually working or paying a hefty rent, seemed to shrink in their seats. The following days were a flurry of hushed conversations and frantic phone calls as they scrambled to find an alternative. Eventually, they announced they had found a small apartment and would be moving out immediately. The process was swift, their belongings packed and removed with a speed that suggested eagerness to leave the situation behind. As their car disappeared down the driveway, Gran turned to Mike and me, her expression softening. "I know it was tough, but it was necessary. You two need your space, and they need to stand on their own." Mike wrapped an arm around Gran, gratitude in his eyes. "Gran, you've done more for us than we could ever repay. Thank you." In the weeks that followed, Gran became more than just a guest. She was a guardian of our home's harmony, a role she played with a blend of sternness and love that only she could manage. In the calm that followed Linda and George moving out, our house felt like it was finally breathing again. Gran, Mike, and I gathered in the living room one night, the gentle hum of the evening wrapping around us, making the space feel sacred after the storm we'd weathered. Breaking the quiet, Gran's tone turned playful. "Well, as much as I've enjoyed the drama, I think it's time for me to head back. The nursing home misses its most troublesome resident." Mike and I shared a look, already dreading her departure. "Gran, this house is always open for you. It's not really home without you," I managed, my voice heavy with emotion. Gran gave my hand a squeeze. "And you're always in my heart. But don't worry, I'll be back to stir things up now and then." We laughed together, a sound that felt like healing. As we said our goodbyes to Gran the next day, watching her taxi disappear, Mike and I knew we were ready for whatever came next. Together. Our home, once a battlefield, was now a symbol of our resilience, a place where love and boundaries found their balance. And as we stepped back into the quiet of our living room, ready to face the future, I felt deeply thankful for the journey that had brought us here, for the family we were, and for the lessons we'd carry forward. A few weeks later, we heard from a mutual acquaintance that Linda and George were living in a small apartment, having sold most of their belongings to cover their debts. The news came as a bittersweet confirmation of the new chapter they, too, were embarking on, a life defined by the consequences of their choices, leaning on each other, perhaps for the first time in a long while. Reflecting on this, Mike and I realized the true depth of the changes we'd all undergone. Our home was peaceful once more, and though the journey had been rough, it had taught us the true meaning of family, resilience, and love. At 27, my life was a tapestry of hard-earned successes and simple joys. I was Jenna, a name known in the corridors of a renowned company, not just for my skills, but for the warmth I carried. It was here, amidst the hustle of deadlines and the aroma of brewed ideas, that I met Alex. He wasn't just another suit, he was a burst of energy, a puzzle I couldn't resist solving. Our first project together was more than just work, it was a dance of minds, a clash and melding of thoughts. "Jenna, your approach is something else. Makes me think outside every box I've ever known," Alex had remarked one late evening, his eyes reflecting the glow of the computer screen. I remember blushing, hiding it behind a chuckle. "Well, Alex, keep up. I have plenty more where that came from," I teased back, the challenge in my voice unmistakable. Our romance wasn't a slow burn, it was a wildfire. It swept through our lives, turning routine coffee breaks into whispered plans, and mundane weekends into explorations of what two hearts beating in sync could discover together. Our wedding was a crescendo of this beautiful melody we'd created. Friends, family, and even skeptical coworkers watched as we promised to walk through life hand in hand. The first 2 years felt like a dream painted in the brightest colors. We were the couple that made single friends sigh and married ones nod in appreciation. We found joy in the little things, the shared popcorn during movie nights, the laughter over burnt toast on lazy Sundays, and the quiet understanding during walks under the canopy of stars. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect life was a silent storm brewing. The joy of our love was shadowed by an absence, a void where the laughter of a child should have been. Each month brought hope, and with it a tinge of despair. The negative tests were like whispers, reminding us of the one dream that remained just out of reach. I remember the nights, lying next to Alex, the moon casting a soft glow on his face. Do you ever think about it? About kids, I mean, I'd ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex, ever the optimist, would pull me close, his voice steady and sure. Of course, Jenna. It'll happen when it's meant to be. We've got each other, and that's more than enough for now. But as months turned into years, the absence grew into an unspoken presence between us. The walks felt longer, the movies less captivating, and the parties became a reminder of what we longed for but couldn't seem to grasp. The laughter of our friends' children echoed like a melody we couldn't quite reach. The air was thick with the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses. Alex and I were at one of our friends' annual bashes, a night when everyone seemed to forget their worries. I was mingling, half listening to stories I'd heard a dozen times, when a voice cut through the din, a voice from a past chapter of my life. Jenna, is that really you? The voice was unmistakable, laced with a boldness that belonged to only one person, Lisa, my high school friend. She hadn't changed a bit, still carrying herself with a presence that turned heads, her style as striking as her personality. I turned, my surprise morphing into a smile. Lisa. I can't believe it's you. It's been ages. Her laughter rang out, genuine and hearty. Too long, Jenna. Look at you, all sophisticated and successful. I always knew you'd make something of yourself. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, memories of our school days weaving through the chatter of the party. I noticed Alex watching from a distance, his eyes curious, but cautious. When Lisa waved him over, his approach was measured, his greeting polite but reserved. Alex, meet Lisa, an old friend from school. I introduced them, watching the interaction closely. Alex extended his hand, his smile polite. Nice to meet you, Lisa. Jenna's told me a lot about her school days. Lisa's reply was quick, a hint of mischief in her eyes. All good things, I hope. Jenna and I go way back. Had quite the adventures, didn't we? The conversation was light, filled with the banter of rekindled friendships and shared histories. But I caught the subtle glances, the unspoken words hanging in the air. Lisa was a force, her vivacity undeniable, but her reputation from our school days, the heartbreaker, the free spirit, lingered in the back of my mind. Over time, Lisa's visits became more frequent, our chats more intimate. We shared stories, laughed over old jokes, and confided in each other like the years apart had been mere days. It felt good, having a piece of my past back, a reminder of carefree days. But as Lisa's presence grew, so did the silence between Alex and me. The void of our unfulfilled dreams seemed to grow wider, the absence louder. Our home, once filled with the echoes of our laughter, now held whispered conversations and unspoken fears. It was during one of Lisa's visits that I finally voiced the worry that had been gnawing at me. The evening was winding down, the room bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Lisa, I don't know what's wrong. Alex and we've been trying, but it's just not happening. The child we've dreamed of, it feels like a mirage now. Lisa's eyes met mine, a depth of understanding in her gaze. Jenna, these things can be complicated. Have you seen a doctor? Sometimes it's not just a one-person issue. Her words, simple yet profound, struck a chord. It was a reality I had skirted around, a truth I had been reluctant to face. But in that moment, with Lisa's frankness, the path forward seemed a little clearer, albeit daunting. Months turned into a silent agony of waiting and hoping. Each failed attempt at starting a family chipped away at the joy that once filled our home. It's just not happening, Alex. We need to face this, face it together, I said one night, the desperation clear in my voice. Alex's reluctance was like a wall between us. Jenna, why are you so hung up on this? I'm telling you, it's not me. But fine, if it makes you happy, I'll do the tests. He finally conceded after countless conversations that seemed to go in circles. The day we went for the full examination felt like a step into the unknown. A part of me was scared of what we might find, but a bigger part just wanted answers. Whatever this brings, we'll deal with it, right? I asked Alex, seeking some reassurance. He just nodded, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet tension. The wait for the results was like living in limbo, each day stretching longer than the last. During these trying times, Lisa, my blast from the past, was a surprising source of comfort. Jenna, you're one tough cookie. Whatever comes out of this, you'll handle it. You always do, she'd say, her support unwavering. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a chance encounter on the street that planted a seed of doubt in my mind. A former classmate, someone who knew the high school version of Lisa all too well, stopped me with a reminder of the past. Jenna, watch out for Lisa, okay? She was a real piece of work back in the day, breaking hearts left and right. You remember, right? She said, her tone half concerned, half curious. I laughed it off, the idea of Lisa, my rock during these turbulent times, being anything less than genuine seemed far-fetched. People change. Lisa's not like that anymore, I responded, but the conversation left a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Later that day, as Alex and I sat in our usual silence, I decided to address the elephant in the room. Alex, can I ask you something? What do you think about Lisa? His reaction was immediate and defensive, a stark contrast to his usual nonchalance. Why does it matter? She's just your friend. I don't care about her one way or the other, he said, his tone a mix of irritation and something else I couldn't quite place. His words did little to ease my mind. Instead, they added to the growing list of questions and doubts that seemed to have no answers. As the days turned into weeks, the waiting game for the test results became a battleground of unspoken fears and doubts. Life at home had taken a sharp turn, the once comforting walls of our home now echoing with Alex's harsh words and relentless criticism. It wasn't just an off day or a bad mood, it was a drastic change that hung heavily in the air. Jenna, can you try a little harder? Look at you, it's always the same old jeans and t-shirt. When you're with me, I want to show you off, not make excuses for your plain Jane look, Alex remarked coldly one evening, his words cutting deeper than he probably intended. I stood there, a mix of hurt and disbelief in my heart. Alex, what's this about? Since when did appearances become more important than who we are to each other? I replied, my voice shaking slightly. But it didn't stop at my appearance. It was everything, my cooking, my cleaning, the very essence of my being. Jenna, this meal, it's bland. And the house, it looks like a tornado hit it. Is this really the best you can do? He'd say, his dissatisfaction clear. Each word stung, each comment a blow to the life we had built together. Confused and hurt, I turned to the one person who had become my confidant through it all, Lisa. Lisa, I don't know what's happening. It's like he's looking for reasons to be unhappy, to criticize me. I don't feel like I'm enough anymore. I shared, the vulnerability clear in my voice. Lisa's response was thoughtful, her words a mix of support and practicality. Jenna, he's being a total jerk. But maybe you guys just need a break from the routine. Why not plan a surprise, something to reignite the spark? How about a romantic trip? The idea was like a beacon of hope, a chance to mend the growing rift between us. Filled with a newfound determination, I approached Alex with the idea. Alex, I've been thinking. Maybe we need a change of scenery, some time away from all this stress. What do you say to 2 weeks in Hawaii, just the two of us? I suggested, the hopeful tremor in my voice betraying my anxiety over his response. To my surprise, his reaction was positive, a glimmer of the old Alex shining through. Jenna, that sounds, actually great. You're right, we could use the time away. Let's do it. he agreed, his words a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. In that moment, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, this trip could be the bridge back to the love and understanding we once shared. The idea of a romantic getaway, of 2 weeks in paradise with the man I still loved, felt like a lifeline, a chance to turn the page on the recent bitterness and start a new chapter. The days leading up to our Hawaii trip were a whirlwind of anticipation and preparation. Alex, taking charge of the arrangements, insisted on handling everything. "Jenna, you've been working too hard lately. Let me sort out the tickets and the hotel. You just focus on packing and getting ready for our escape," he said, a smile playing on his lips. I was touched by his thoughtfulness, a glimpse of the man I fell in love with. "That's so sweet of you, Alex." "Thank you, I could really use the break," I replied, my heart light with the promise of a fresh start. With Lisa's help, I dove into preparations. Shopping for the trip was like weaving dreams into reality. "Jenna, this swimsuit is stunning on you. Alex won't be able to take his eyes off you," Lisa chuckled as I twirled in front of the mirror, the fabric hugging my curves just right. "Thanks, Lisa. I really hope this trip brings us back together. It feels like we're finally turning a page," I said, the excitement bubbling within me like champagne. The day of departure arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and excitement. Alex seemed more upbeat than usual, a good sign, I thought. As we reached the airport, the buzz of travelers and the scent of adventure filled the air. But the unexpected sight of Lisa there turned the excitement into confusion. "Lisa? What are you doing here?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. The smirk on Alex's face and the glint in Lisa's eyes were the first cracks in my carefully built hopes. "Jenna, the thing is, Lisa's the one joining me to Hawaii." "Not you," Alex said, his words slicing through the din of the airport like a knife. I stood there, disbelief and betrayal warring within me. "But Alex, this trip was for us, our chance to reconnect," I stammered, the world tilting around me. His laughter was a sound I barely recognized, cold and distant. "Reconnect? Jenna, you're living in a dream. I'm done playing house. Lisa and we're a thing now. Your little vacation plan just turned into our romantic getaway." Lisa's grip on Alex's arm tightened, her victory clear in her eyes. "Oh, Jenna, you're such a dear friend. Funding our little escapade, how generous of you." Their words were daggers, their laughter a poison spreading through my veins. "You're leaving me just like this?" I managed to say, my voice a mere whisper. He shrugged, the casualness of his betrayal a final blow. "The divorce papers waiting for you at home, Jenna. Just sign them. It's the least you can do for us." Left alone in the echoing vastness of the airport, the world around me felt unreal, like a scene from a movie where the protagonist's life unravels before her eyes. My heart was heavy, a mix of betrayal, shock, and an overwhelming sense of loss consuming me. It was then, amid the chaos of my crumbling world, that an unexpected voice reached out. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help with anything?" The voice was gentle, concerned, cutting through the fog of my despair. I looked up, my eyes meeting those of a stranger. He was about my age, his expression kind, genuine. My husband, they just left me here," I stammered, the words feeling foreign as they left my lips. The man hesitated for a moment, then took a careful step closer. "I'm Ethan. If you want, I can stay with you for a bit, or help you get home, whatever you need," he offered, his tone warm and sincere. His kindness, a stark contrast to the cold betrayal I had just experienced, was a small light in the darkness. "Thank you, Ethan. I'm Jenna. I don't even know where to begin." We found a quiet corner in a cafe, the noise of the airport fading into the background. Ethan listened as I poured out the story, the pain, and confusion evident in my every word. "So, he planned this all along? Took your idea and turned it into this?" Ethan's voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. I nodded, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper with every spoken word. I feel so foolish, Ethan. To think I was planning this trip to fix things, and all the while, he was planning this. Ethan's gaze was steady, supportive. Jenna, you're not foolish. You're human, and you trusted someone you loved. That's not foolishness, that's courage. And his actions, that's cowardice. His words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my wounded heart. We talked for what felt like hours, Ethan's presence a steady anchor in the storm that had become my life. Eventually, he glanced at his watch, a gentle reminder of the world moving on around us. Jenna, I can drive you home if you want. You shouldn't be alone right now. The offer, so simple yet so profound, was a lifeline. Thank you, Ethan. I'd appreciate that. I don't want to face that empty house just yet, but I know I need to. The drive was quiet, the hum of the engine a backdrop to my tumultuous thoughts. As we reached my house, the reality of what awaited me inside hit hard. Ethan seemed to sense my hesitation. Jenna, if you need anything, here's my number. Don't think you're alone in this. Some people, they're just not worth your tears, he said, handing me a small piece of paper with his number scrawled on it. I took it, a small smile breaking through the tears. Thank you, Ethan. For everything. Today, you were the friend I didn't know I needed. A year had rolled by, a year of healing, of rebuilding, of finding strength I never knew I had. But stepping back into my hometown, the ghosts of my past were waiting, lurking in the shadows of familiar streets and faces. It was in a quaint little cafe, where the past decided to rear its ugly head. Sitting there, lost in my thoughts, a voice that I hoped to never hear again cut through the calm. Jenna, look what the cat dragged in. Still the same, I see. Alex sneered, his eyes raking over me with a disdain I remembered all too well. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. What do you want, Alex? I asked, my voice steady, a testament to the year of battles fought and won. His smirk grew wider, more malicious. Just wanted to flaunt my perfect life, Jenna. Lisa and we're married now. And guess what? She's given me a child, something you never could. His words stung, a deliberate jab at my deepest wounds. But the old Jenna, the one who would crumble, was no more. Good for you, Alex. I hope you're happy, I replied, my words a shield against his cruelty. But he wasn't done. The arrogance, the sheer audacity, dripped from his next invitation. Why don't you come over, Jenna? See the life you missed out on. Meet your replacement and our beautiful baby. It was a challenge, a cruel game in his twisted mind. But this time I was playing by a different set of rules. Sure, Alex. I'll come by. It's time to face the past, I said, the resolve in my voice belying the storm inside. And so, I found myself at the doorstep of the home I once shared with Alex, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with a fierce determination. The door swung open, and there stood Lisa, her smirk a mirror of Alex's cruelty. Jenna, you haven't changed a bit. Still the same old gray mouse, she taunted, her words dripping with scorn. But the Jenna standing at her doorstep was not alone. Beside me stood Ethan, the unexpected ally from the airport, now my partner, my strength. I introduced him with pride swelling in my chest. Lisa, meet Ethan, my husband. The shock on their faces was a sight to behold. Alex's smugness faltered, Lisa's mockery dimmed. They tried, oh how they tried, to belittle us, to break us down with their venomous words. But together, Ethan and I stood strong, a united front against the storm of their malice. Jenna, I can't believe you'd stoop so low. Bringing him here, what a desperate move, Alex scoffed, his words a feeble attempt to regain control. Ethan's arm around my shoulder was all the response I needed. Desperate? No, Alex. We're here to close a chapter, to move on from the past that you cling to so pitifully. The air was tense as Ethan and I stood in the living room of the house I once called home. The walls, once witnesses to my heartache, were now the backdrop for the final act of a saga that had tormented me for too long. Alex's mocking tone sliced through the silence. Remember how lost you looked at the airport, Jenna? Like a little puppy abandoned by its owner. I still laugh thinking about it. The words were meant to wound, but as I looked into Ethan's supportive eyes, I felt an unwavering strength within me. Actually, Alex, that day turned out to be a blessing. Because of your cruelty, I met Ethan. He's been my rock ever since, I replied, a serene smile on my face. Alex's smirk wavered, confusion and shock intermingling in his gaze as he looked at Ethan. And what's so special about this guy? He sneered, trying to regain his footing. Ethan's presence was calm yet imposing. Well, Alex, aside from picking up the pieces of the life you shattered, I also recently became the director at your esteemed company. Funny how life works, isn't it? The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow, his arrogance melting away, leaving a pale, shaken man in its place. Before he could recover, Lisa, with her characteristic spite, decided to strike what she thought would be a crushing blow. At least I gave Alex something you couldn't, Jenna. A child. The ultimate gift. She spat, her eyes gleaming with malice. The room was charged, the air thick with tension and unspoken truths. I couldn't help but laugh, the absurdity of the situation and the secret I held turning my despair into amusement. Oh, Lisa, the irony of your statement is richer than you know, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the envelope containing the test results, the paper that held the key to unlocking the sham that was their life. Alex, these tests we took, they revealed a truth you've been too blind to see. You're incapable of fatherhood. This child Lisa's so proud of? It can't be yours. The words hung heavy in the room, a tangible testament to the crumbling facade of their lies. Alex's face was a mask of shock and betrayal, his eyes darting between the paper in his hand and Lisa's suddenly ashen face. Lisa's voice trembled, her confidence shattered. Alex, baby, this must be some mistake. Jenna's lying, she has to be. But there was no mistaking the truth, the undeniable reality inked on the paper. The arguments erupted, accusations and denials bouncing off the walls, the sound of their once united front cracking at the seams. Ethan's hand squeezed mine, a silent signal that it was time to leave the chaos behind. Let's go, Jenna. We have our own future to look forward to, one built on truth and love, not deceit. As we stepped out of the house, the door closing behind us felt like the final chapter of a painful saga coming to an end. The sun outside seemed brighter, the world filled with new possibilities, and the promise of the life growing inside me, a life created from love, not lies. Behind us, Alex and Lisa's world, a house of cards built on deception, was left to collapse. The courtroom would be their next battleground, but for Ethan and me, it was the start of something beautiful. A chapter of joy, of honest love, and the sweetest victory of all, a life well lived, a future bright with hope and the laughter of our soon-to-arrive child. I'm Jess, and if you told me 11 years ago that my life would take such a wild turn, I'd have laughed it off. But here I am, stuck in a reality I never imagined. It all began innocently enough. I met Jack at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was charming, with a smile that could light up a room, and we hit it off right away. Fast forward through a whirlwind romance, and we were married, living what seemed like a dream. A year into our marriage, our son Max came into the world, making our little family feel complete. Life got real tough when Max started getting sick all the time. My job was on the line, but my boss, Mr. Harris, he was a lifesaver. Jess, you're a rock star at work, and we can't lose you. How about you work from home? Keep an eye on the little guy and keep the ball rolling here, he suggested. And just like that, my living room turned into my new office. Juggling work calls, Max's needs, and household chores became my new norm. But that's where the fairy tale ended and real life began. As I became this superwoman handling it all, something in Jack changed. The man who used to help around the house, who used to play with Max for hours, began to change. It was like he resented me for being at home, even though it was for our son. He'd walk in from work, not even a hello before he'd slump on the couch, eyes glued to his phone. "Jack, could you help Max with his homework?" I'd ask after a long day of balancing spreadsheets and laundry. "I'm beat, Jess. You handle it. You're home all day, aren't you?" He'd reply, not even looking up. His words stung, but I bit my tongue. I didn't want to fight in front of Max, who was becoming more perceptive each day. But it wasn't just me. His attitude towards Max shifted too. Gone were the days of patient father-son chats. Now, it was all short, snappy comments. "Max, quit being a baby. Man up." Jack would snap when Max struggled with something. I tried to talk to Jack about it, to understand what was eating at him. But every attempt just bounced off him like he was made of stone. "Jack, we need to talk. This isn't working," I said one evening when Max was at a sleepover. "Here we go again. Nag, nag, nag. You know, maybe if you weren't so busy playing the perfect housewife, you'd see I'm dealing with real stress at work," he retorted, his words laced with a bitterness that took me aback. "But we're supposed to be a team, Jack. It's us against the problem, not us against each other," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "Save it, Jess. I've got enough on my plate without home becoming another battlefield," he said, dismissing the conversation with a wave of his hand before storming out. I stood there, in the silence of our living room, feeling more alone than ever. It was like living with a stranger, a man who wore the same face as my husband but carried none of his warmth, none of his love. The shift in Jack's behavior didn't just come out of the blue. It crept in slowly, like a shadow growing longer as the sun sets, until one day, the room was dark. About 3 years back, that's when the late nights started becoming more frequent. Each time Jack walked through the door past midnight, his excuses were as thin as paper. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Max had just won his soccer game, and we were waiting to celebrate with Jack. But as usual, the chair at the head of the table remained empty. Max's eyes kept darting to the clock, then to the door, and finally, settling on me with a mix of disappointment and confusion. I plastered a smile on my face, trying to keep the mood light. "Your dad's really swamped at work, honey. But he's so proud of you, you know that, right?" I reassured Max, but the words felt hollow even to me. It wasn't until much later that Jack decided to grace us with his presence. The sound of the door creaking open pulled me out of my troubled thoughts. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the remains of a celebration that never was laid out in front of me. Jack walked in, looking worn out, but there was something else in his demeanor, something off. I could smell the faint trace of perfume, definitely not mine, and it made my stomach churn. "Jack, where have you been? Max waited up for you. He won his game today, remember?" I tried to keep the accusation out of my voice, but it was hard. The game. Yeah, work, Jess. It's killing me. You know how it is," Jack mumbled, not even bothering to meet my gaze as he made a beeline for the fridge. "No, I don't know, Jack. It seems like work is all you ever have to say these days. And what's that smell? Since when do your colleagues wear such strong perfume?" I pushed, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Jack's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What are you implying, Jess? That I'm cheating on you? That's rich, coming from someone who's holed up here all day." The accusation stung, and I felt my face flush with anger. "I'm here taking care of our son, our home, while you're out there doing God knows what. And it's not just the perfume, Jack. I found a strand of black hair on your jacket. Last time I checked, my hair was blonde." Jack let out a scoff, his ego inflating like a balloon. "Oh, please, Jess. You're being paranoid. You think just because I come home smelling like someone else's perfume, I'm having an affair? Maybe you're just jealous. Maybe you still want me, huh?" I was taken aback by his mockery. It wasn't like him. The Jack I knew would have reassured me, would have laughed it off and made me feel like a fool for even doubting. But this man, this stranger in my kitchen, he was egging me on, almost enjoying it. You think this is funny, Jack? Our marriage is hanging by a thread, and you're standing there making jokes? What happened to you? My voice broke, the frustration and hurt I'd been bottling up finally spilling over. Jack shrugged, his expression cold and detached. Maybe I've just had enough, Jess. Enough of this domestic bliss you keep trying to shove down my throat. I'm out there busting my ass every day, and I come home to this nagging and suspicion. You want to know where I've been? Out, where I don't have to deal with this crap. With those words, he grabbed a beer from the fridge and headed towards the living room, leaving me standing there, a mix of disbelief and anger coursing through me. As I heard the TV flick on, the familiar sound of laughter from some late-night show filling the house, I realized that the gap between us had grown too wide to bridge with mere words. The day started like any other, with Max's laughter filling the house as I juggled work and household chores. But a call from Mr. Harris changed everything. Jess, we need you in the office today. Big client coming in, and we can't do this without you, he said. I was torn. Max was down with one of his fevers again, and with Jack's unpredictable schedule, I couldn't just leave our son alone. I called Jack, hoping he'd understand the urgency. Jack, it's important. Mr. Harris needs me at the office. Can you come home early today? Max isn't feeling well. Jack's response was a cold splash of reality. Are you kidding me, Jess? You know I can't just leave work in the middle of the day. Handle it, like you always do. His words stung, but there was no time to argue. I called Helen, Jack's mom, and thank heavens, she agreed to help. Of course, dear. You go and take care of your work. Max will be fine with me. The meeting was intense, but we nailed it. Mr. Harris suggested celebrating at a nearby restaurant, and though my mind was at home with Max, I couldn't refuse. We settled into our seats, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversations around us. But as I scanned the room, my heart dropped. There, in a dimly lit corner, was Jack, his hand on another woman's, their heads close together in intimate conversation. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Mr. Harris noticed my pale face. Jess, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I need a moment, I managed to say, my legs shaky as I stood up. I headed to the restroom, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not Jack. Not us. But the truth was right there, laughing and flirting over candlelight. I splashed water on my face, trying to calm the storm inside me. As I looked in the mirror, a fierce determination replaced the shock. I wouldn't let this slide. Not this time. Back at the table, I apologized to Mr. Harris and the clients. I'm sorry, I need to take care of something urgent. Please excuse me. I left the restaurant, my mind a whirlwind of hurt and anger. Jack didn't even notice me leave, so engrossed was he in his affair. I made it home, my hands trembling as I opened the door. Helen was there, her concerned eyes meeting mine. Is everything all right, dear? I couldn't spill it, not then. Just a rough day at work, Helen. Thanks for watching, Max. Helen gave me a knowing look. Anything you want to talk about? I forced a smile. Nothing to worry about. Just work stuff. Thanks again, Helen. After Helen left, the silence of the house wrapped around me. The image of Jack with that woman replayed in my mind. But I wasn't about to let anger take the wheel. This fury was fuel. Jack had made his choice, and now it was my move. The game had shifted, and as the night crept in, a plan began to form. A plan to make sure Jack regretted betraying the family he took for granted. The next morning felt heavy, like I was carrying a weight around my heart. Jack had left early, his usual routine, acting like nothing was wrong. But everything had changed for me. As I watched Max play, his innocence a stark contrast to the mess of our lives, I knew I had to act. But how? I couldn't just confront Jack without proof, and my word against his wouldn't hold up. I remembered a conversation with a friend about a private detective they had used. It seemed like a drastic step, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I waited until Max was settled with his video games, then I made the call. "Hello, is this Mr. Reynolds?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, this is he." "How can I help you, ma'am?" came the reply, professional and to the point. I took a deep breath. I need your services. I suspect my husband is involved with someone else. I need proof." Mr. Reynolds was all business. "I understand, ma'am. We handle these cases with utmost discretion. Can you tell me more about your situation?" I poured out the details, the late nights, the perfume, the restaurant incident. Mr. Reynolds listened without interruption, then said, "We can start surveillance on your husband immediately. We'll gather evidence and keep you updated. My fee is—" I agreed without hesitation. The price didn't matter, I needed the truth. Days turned into weeks, and each time Mr. Reynolds sent over photos or snippets of conversations, my heart sank a little more. Jack with the same woman, at restaurants, at a park, and once, chillingly, at a jewelry store. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, each piece of evidence a brutal confirmation of Jack's betrayal. One evening, as I sat staring at the latest set of photos, Max came up to me. "Mom, why are you sad? Did something happen?" I quickly hid the photos and forced a smile. "It's nothing, honey. Just some work stuff. You know how it is." Max looked unconvinced. "If Dad is making you sad, I can tell him to stop. He should be nice to you." I hugged him, tears threatening to spill. "You're such a good boy, Max. But it's not your fight. Mom's got this under control, okay?" Max nodded, but his eyes still held worry. It broke my heart to see him like this, but it also steeled my resolve. Jack had to be held accountable, not just for me, but for Max's sake too. Max's 10th birthday should have been a day of joy and laughter, a celebration of a decade of life. The house was decorated, the cake was ready, and Max's eyes sparkled with excitement. But as the day unfolded, it became clear that it was going to be anything but typical. Jack, once the cornerstone of our little family, had been drifting away, his presence now just a shadow. This day was no different. "Jess, work slammed. I can't make it," he said over the phone, his voice as cold as the winter wind. I watched from the window as he drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and a heavy heart behind. Helen and George, Jack's folks, did their best to fill the void, their faces a mix of concern and disappointment. The party was in full swing, the sound of children's laughter a bittersweet melody. Then, out of nowhere, my phone shattered the calm. Jack's voice, panicked and loud, boomed through the speaker. "Our son's been hit. He's at the hospital now." The room froze, the festive air turning to ice. But there, right in front of me, was Max, safe and unharmed. "Jack, check your number." "Max is right here, safe and sound," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. There was a pause, a moment of silence that felt like an eternity. Then, a quiet, "Sorry, wrong number," before the line went dead. The room was thick with confusion and unspoken questions. I gently nudged Max towards his room, his new video game in hand. "Go on, sweetie. I'll be right there," I said, mustering a smile that felt more like a grimace. Once Max was out of sight, I turned to face Helen and George. Their faces were a mix of shock and worry, a silent demand for an explanation hanging in the air. "Helen, George, there's something you need to know," I began, my heart heavy. "Jack hasn't just been buried in work. He's involved with someone else. They have a child together, a little boy." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Helen's eyes welled with tears, and George's jaw clenched, his anger barely contained. "Jess, are you certain?" Helen's voice was a whisper, her world crumbling. I nodded, the truth a bitter pill. I've seen them, heard their conversations. It's undeniable. The room was silent, the weight of betrayal pressing down on us. We're with you, Jess. Our son, doing this, it's unforgivable, Helen said, her voice quivering but strong. George stood up, his posture rigid with resolve. Jack will have to face us, to explain this madness. He owes you, answers. The rest of the day was a haze. The candles were blown out, the cake was cut, but the joy was overshadowed by the storm that loomed on the horizon. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that this was no longer just my battle. That evening, the house was quiet, too quiet. It was the calm before the storm. I sat in the living room, Helen and George by my side, the air heavy with anticipation. We were waiting for Jack, the man who had shattered our lives with his deceit. The door creaked open, and there he was, sneaking in like a thief, unaware of the confrontation that awaited him. He tiptoed towards the stairs, but before he could take another step, I flicked on the light. Evening, Jack. How's your son? The one who got hit by a car? I asked, my voice calm but laced with a venom that made him freeze in his tracks. Helen and George sat there, silent sentinels, their eyes fixed on Jack, waiting for his response. Jack's face went pale, his facade crumbling. That was a bad joke, Jess. I didn't mean it. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. A joke? Is that what you call it? Without another word, I threw the photos and documents on the table in front of him. Each picture, each piece of paper, a testament to his betrayal. This is no joke, Jack. This is your other life, laid bare for all to see. Jack's eyes darted from the photos to his parents, the magnitude of his actions finally sinking in. I can explain, he stammered, but his words fell flat. You're done talking, Jack. These pictures, these documents, they speak louder than any lie you could come up with, I said, my resolve steel. Helen let out a sob, her hands covering her face. George's expression was stone, his disappointment a tangible force in the room. To think our son would stoop this low, he muttered. Jack turned to his parents, desperation in his eyes. Mom, Dad, But George cut him off, his voice firm and final. You've made your bed, Jack. Now you lie in it. I'm cutting you off. Everything you would have gotten goes to Max. Jack looked at me, a last-ditch plea in his eyes. Jess, please. I'll do anything. Don't do this. But the time for mercy had passed. You had your chance, Jack. Now it's time you face the consequences. I want a divorce, and I'll make sure you pay for every heartache you've caused. The room was silent, the finality of my words hanging in the air. Jack, defeated and broken, gathered his things, his departure marking the end of our life together, but the beginning of a new chapter for me, for Max, for us. Days after Jack's departure, the echo of the door slamming still hung in the air, like a bad odor. I thought I'd seen the last of the drama, but I was dead wrong. The doorbell rang, a sharp, intrusive sound that felt like an invasion. Standing there, with a smirk that could sour milk, was Jack's mistress, her confidence as misplaced as her morals. Well, if it isn't the jilted wife. Time to pack up, darling. Jack's with me now, and so's everything that was yours. This pretty little house? I'm thinking curtains, maybe some new furniture. Her words were like nails on a chalkboard. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bitter. You're dreaming if you think you can claim my house. This place? It's from my family. Jack couldn't lay a claim on it if he tried. Her smug expression faltered, confusion and anger warring on her face. She whipped out her phone, her false nails tapping furiously. Jack, you better explain this right now. You said this house was ours. In no time, Jack was at the door, his face ashen. The house, it's Jess's, he stammered, avoiding my gaze. The mistress's face turned a shade of red I didn't know existed. You pathetic liar. You promised me a fairy tale, and now you're telling me it's just a bedtime story? I watched the drama unfold, my arms crossed, a smirk playing on my lips. But I had one more card to play. Seems like we're airing dirty laundry today. Why not throw in these? I said, slapping the photos on the table. Looks like someone's been two-timing. Here you are, leaving a hotel with another man. Care to explain, sweetheart? The room erupted into chaos, a tornado of insults, accusations, and shattered illusions. I stood there, the eye of the storm, watching the destruction. Thinking of a paternity test, Jack? Might want to find out if you're really the daddy. The aftermath was a scene from a soap opera. The mistress, her dreams shattered, stormed out, leaving Jack standing in the ruins of his choices. And me? I stood tall, the victor in a battle I never wanted to fight. The final chapter of the tumultuous saga brought both closure and new beginnings. The divorce was more than a legal separation, it was the severing of ties that had bound me to a life of uncertainty and betrayal. Jack, in a desperate attempt to cling to a shred of dignity, underwent the DNA test, only to have his illusions shattered. The child he thought was his bore no trace of his DNA. Helen and George, once the loving grandparents and in-laws, now stood as my steadfast allies. George's decision to create a trust fund for Max wasn't just about securing a future for his grandson, it was a statement, a clear denouncement of Jack's actions. This boy's future won't be clouded by his father's shadow, George had said, his voice heavy with a mix of anger and resolve. The house, once filled with laughter, then whispers of betrayal, was now a sanctuary of peace. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Mr. Harris, or Tom as he insisted, visited. His presence had always been a source of comfort, but this time, there was a different energy about him. Jess, I hope it's okay, me dropping by like this, Tom began, his hands slightly fidgeting, a contrast to his usual composed demeanor. I offered him a smile, the familiarity of his presence a welcome comfort. Of course, Tom. It's always good to see you. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. Jess, I've been doing a lot of thinking, especially after everything that's happened. I've seen you handle life's curveballs with such grace and strength. It made me realize something I should have acknowledged a long time ago. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken words and emotions. Tom, what are you trying to say? His gaze met mine, earnest and unwavering. I love you, Jess. Not just as the brilliant colleague you are, not just as the friend who's been by my side. I love you for the incredible woman you are, for the strength you embody. I want to be there for you, for Max, if you'll let me. The confession, honest and raw, stirred something within me. A mix of surprise, fear, and a flicker of hope. Tom, this is a lot to take in. I appreciate your feelings, truly. But I need time to process, to understand what this means for me, for Max, for us. Tom nodded, understanding etching his features. Take all the time you need, Jess. I'm not going anywhere. I just wanted you to know how I feel, to understand that whatever the future holds, I'm here. As he left, the silence of the house enveloped me. The words we'd exchanged echoed in my mind, a gentle yet profound reminder that life still had surprises in store, that maybe, the end of one chapter was simply the beginning of another.